This video explains the use of the Every Week Counts 2013 data collection tool. Every Week Counts is a collaboration among 55 Oklahoma hospitals with the intent to eliminate early elective deliveries. For more information about Every Week Counts, visit www.oumedicine.com/EWC. To begin using the 2013 tool, your file first needs to be personalized. This can be done by saving the file, ensuring that your hospital name is included at the beginning of the file name. Once your file is saved, you then need to put your name within the file of the tool. This is done on the first sheet of the workbook, the inductions table. Just simply input your hospital's name into that field, and then every month when your data is reported, it is helpful if you update the date reported. Your hospital's name and the date reported will then be connected to all of the other tables within the workbook. As we move through the tool, we will be using the sample hospital, General Hospital, and a delivery log for January of 2013. In January, General Hospital experienced a total of 30 deliveries. When completing deliveries, for total deliveries for your hospital, keep in mind that a delivery of twins counts as one delivery. There are multiple ways to be able to review the delivery information for your hospital. One way is to get your delivery log and start to count by hand, and there are other ways by possibly abstracting from computer documentation. The way that I'm going to process through General Hospital's delivery log is to use the delivery log organizer. You may find this organizer as a tool on the Every Week Counts homepage. So from oumedicine.com/EWC, you can click on the EWC Data Collection Tools link. And on that page, you will find a link to the tool and also the delivery log organizer. And this is simply an Excel document that we have created with multiple columns, able to filter and sort based on the columns, so that it might help for you to actually organize the information for your hospital's deliveries. Here I have it sorted by date, but to count the number of inductions, I'm going to sort by procedures. And this is information that can be copied and pasted into this, or hand done. You may find that time consuming. In January, General Hospital experienced 6 inductions. And I know that 5 of those were at 39 weeks and more, and there were no inductions at less than 39 weeks without a medical indication. Column I then calculates the number of inductions less than 39 weeks with a medical indication. And I can verify that information by checking my delivery log. And there was, in fact, 1 induction at 38 weeks with a medical indication of gestational diabetes. Again, the use of the delivery log organizer is optional. I complete a similar process by moving on to the second sheet in the workbook, the C-section table. Notice the total deliveries autofills from what I put on the previous sheet. From the log, I know that in January there were 7 total scheduled C-sections, and a scheduled C-section is a previously planned C-section that is non-emergent. Women who present in labor or with spontaneous rupture of the membranes and end up with a C-section are not considered to have a scheduled C-section. The number of scheduled C-sections at 39 weeks and more were 2, and there was one scheduled C-section at 38 weeks, so less than 39, without a medical indication. Now that I have completed both the inductions and the C-section table, you will notice that a rate appears for the rate of early elective deliveries. This has a denominator of total deliveries, and the rate here is 3.3%. Total deliveries is the denominator that has been used consistently since the beginning of every week counts. It is a different measurement than the Joint Commission core measure PC01, which we'll talk about more in depth when we get to the core measure sheets in the workbook. Completing the third sheet, the inductions 37 and 38 weeks table, in column B, you are to input the total deliveries at 37 weeks, and this is all deliveries at 37 weeks, no matter how they delivered. I know that in January, General Hospital had 4 deliveries at 37 weeks and 7 deliveries at 38 weeks. Now the rest of the table is specific to inductions. General Hospital did not have any inductions at 37 weeks, either without or with a medical indication. They did have one induction at 38 weeks with a medical indication, which is indicated here. So there was one induction at 37 and 38 weeks, and it was at 38 weeks with a medical indication. Columns L and M are auto-calculated to determine the number of inductions less than 37 weeks with or without a medical indication. These two columns grab information from the first inductions table. For instance, in column I, we indicated that there was one induction less than 39 weeks with a medical indication. And on the induction 37 and 38 weeks tab, we indicated that there were 0 inductions at 37 weeks with a medical indication, and 1 at 38 weeks with a medical indication. It took that less than 39, subtracted the 37 and the 38, and determined that there were 0 inductions less than 37 weeks with a medical indication. A common error when using the tool is to discover negative numbers in one of these two columns. I can simulate that by if I were to say on this table that there were 2 inductions at 38 weeks with a medical indication. It takes that 1 from the first sheet on the inductions table, subtracts 0 and 2, and we end up with a -1. Please pay close attention to the automated fields within the tool to ensure that the rest of the data that you're inputting in the white cells is accurate. Continuing to the fourth sheet, the C-sections at 37 and 38 weeks, we fill in the same information regarding scheduled C-sections. The rest of the tool is intended to collect data related to the Joint Commission core measure PC01 elective delivery. From this point forward, the core measure will be referred to as PC01. EWC began collecting this data in July of 2012. while EWC and PCO1 are intended to measure the same issue, they measure them in different ways. EWC has always used a denominator of total deliveries to determine the early elective delivery rate. PCO1 uses a denominator of 37 and 38-week deliveries, further narrowing that denominator by excluding certain conditions in certain women from that population. For more information about the PCO1 measure, you can find the link on the Every Week Counts webpage and click on the TJC Core Measure PCO1 link. There you'll find links to the actual Joint Commission algorithm and more information about the measure set. There are 2 sheets within the tool in which you can enter PCO1 data. The first is the Core Measure Enter from Software table. The second is the Core Measure Enter by Hand table. On the Enter from Software table, this is intended to be used if your hospital utilizes a vendor system or software to automatically generate a numerator and denominator for PCO1. If that is the case for your facility, you would just simply input those numbers into columns E and F. If your facility is not taking advantage of using a computer software to generate the data, then you would complete the Enter by Hand table. Only one of these must be complete. General Hospital will be entering by hand. On this table, columns C and D automatically populate the total deliveries at 37 and 38 weeks based on what was entered on the previous tables. To determine the core measure denominator in column F, you will take the total of the 37 and 38 week deliveries, in this case 11. Of those 11 cases, remove cases that meet exclusion criteria. The Joint Commission excludes certain women from the measure population if they possibly have a reason for an early elective delivery. Most cases are excluded based on the ICD-9 codes that are listed in Table 11.07. This is a list of 74 ICD-9 codes that is titled Conditions Possibly Justifying Elective Delivery Prior to 39 Weeks Gestation. It includes multiple maternal, fetal, and some multiple gestation codes. If a woman has any of these codes documented in her medical record, she would be excluded from the measure. The other reasons women might be excluded would be if they had had a prior uterine surgery, if she is younger than 8 or older than 65, enrolled in a clinical trial, or has a length of stay of greater than 120 days. Any case that meets any of these criteria is excluded. One benefit of using the delivery log organizer would be the ICD-9 codes column, in which any of those 74 codes, if present, would highlight that cell as red, indicating that that woman would be excluded based on a condition in the 11.07 table. One way that I might be able to use this to sort through my delivery log, determine the women that would be included, would be to first sort by gestational age. I can do that by clicking on the arrow in this column, selecting a number filter, and having it display only women that delivered at 37 or 38 weeks. The list now reflects the women that delivered at 37 or 38 weeks gestation. I want to remove the cases that are going to meet exclusion criteria. And in column G, it appears that several of the women have one of the conditions that listed on table 1107. For instance, one woman has gestational diabetes, another preeclampsia, IUGR, twins, and one has choreo. To show only the women that do not meet the exclusion criteria, I can filter column G based on cell color, knowing that cells that are filled in with red have one of the conditions on table 11.07. This leaves 4 women as the cases that are going to be my denominator, the measure population. The number then that I'm going to put in as my denominator is 4, because 7 of those 11 cases met one of these exclusion criteria. Column F is our denominator. It is our measure population, which includes women who delivered at the facility at either 37 or 38 weeks, but did not meet exclusion criteria. Of these 4 women, theoretically, none of them should have had an early elective delivery. So in columns H and I, I'm going to indicate those number of those 4 women that were either induced or had a scheduled C-section. For PCO1, an induction is considered any woman that has one of these 3 procedure codes documented in the medical record. Documentation of any one of these 3 codes would put a woman in the induction column on the core measure enter by hand table. I know from my delivery log that none of those 4 women had an induction, but it does appear that one had a scheduled C-section at 38 weeks, and there is no documented indication. For PCO1, a woman is considered to have a scheduled C-section if there is no documentation of labor or spontaneous rupture of membranes. So on the calculated by hand table, I will put a 0 in the induction column and a 1 in the scheduled C-section column. The sum of these 2 columns ends up being the numerator. So for PCO1, 1 out of the 4 women in the measure population had an elective delivery, which gives me a rate of 25%. As you can see, the smaller the denominator, the higher the rate will likely be. The rest of the sheets in the workbook include the core measure exclusion criteria, which are the tables related to the PCO1 measure, the every week counts criteria, which is information that we have been using for the every week counts measure from the beginning, and the last sheet is an instructions sheet. This may be helpful if you have any questions regarding what to put in any column on any of the tables within the workbook. If you have any further questions about the data collection tool or about every week counts, please feel free to contact the Office of Perinatal Quality Improvement at 405-271-7777.